Hey guys, and welcome to another brand new video. In this video, we actually have a little bit of a bigger issue going on over here when it comes to PlayStation. Now, as of right now in this news cycle especially, so if you guys see the type of almost tone shift on the YouTube channel, don't mind that. I'm just kind of reporting on the news and kind of giving my take on all the information as it does kind of come on out. Right now, we're actually seeing some pretty big accusations over here where Sony Studio Firesprite, which is basically like a Sony PlayStation Studios team, has apparently been horrible, as in it's been shedding talent. It's been basically being accused of being a very, very horrible workplace, and right now it's kind of one of the first times we're kind of seeing a lot of toxicity now floating out from the PlayStation ecosystem. Now, I do want to go and say two really quick, talks over here. Number one, we have also seen outside other companies performing very well. So we've always heard of things like the Insomniac or Naughty Dog usually doing very well in terms of treating their employees, and same thing with Bungie too as well. And even PlayStation does seem to have some pretty good severance packages, and overall seems okay. But we're also now seeing more information coming out, and of course, always take everything with a grain of salt if they're just off of people who just got fired or laid off. Not to say that they don't deserve to go and kind of give their freedom of speech and say what they want to say, but as well also sometimes the negative cycles are also skewing towards more negative to get views because people are kind of, tying off the attention off that. So just going to give a quick disclaimer too. So make your own opinions on this type of stuff. I'll definitely give my own thoughts as well. But right now we're kind of seeing a lot more of a big kind of gusto when it comes to the gaming community, calling out all their wrongs. And I feel like a lot of this stuff has been kind of on the overdue side. Now let's go talk about it. As well, make sure you guys are subscribed with the notifications on, with the Twitter, Twitch, and down below. We have everything else too as well. And I appreciate you guys all so much for watching here in the first place. So we have Sony Studio Firesprite has been shedding talent amidst accusations of toxic culture, staff says. Death by 1,000 cuts. So as I just mentioned, we had a lot of really big PlayStation layoffs, and it's kind of been taking the news by storm. A lot of folks are not happy with PlayStation. A lot of folks are calling out the actual studios themselves, and basically people right now want to have answers. They want to know about the future of PlayStation. They're worried about the company. The stock is going down, the games are mediocre, and people are kind of curious on if they want to play the next Spider-Man game at all, or if they want to play any of the other games, hopefully throughout the next 5 years. That's a big deal. You want to make sure you're actually playing and enjoying your console, let alone only the big blockbuster hits. But as well, people are also concerned about layoffs and if the companies are treating people well. Now, as I mentioned, I've actually been hearing a lot of good stuff in terms of people being treated pretty well and having pretty decent pay and having a pretty good long-term, just job. But obviously with layoffs, that long-term stability is kind of a little more questioned. And as well also in terms of the stock going down, that makes a lot more questions on the shareholders, and things are getting sketchy. Sony acquired Studio Firesprite has recently suffered high-profile exits amid accusations of a toxic workplace culture. Eurogamer has now been told. As part of an investigation to the studio begun ahead of the layoffs announced by Sony this week. The Liverpool-based developer released the PlayStation VR 2 launch title Horizon Call of the Mountain last year, which is probably the biggest game, I would say, on the PlayStation VR. That was the only game with a bundle that was pretty much the biggest, first-party title that was sold on VR, and I think that was meant to be the console seller. This is after actually being acquired by Sony in 2021. But the impact of crunch for that game's release and changes in the company's senior leadership has subsequently led to discontent within the studio, staff have told the Eurogamer, something one source described as death by 1,000 cuts. Most concerning are reports from sources that two senior leads from Sony Support Studio X Dev brought in to help basically lead the Firesprite, and have since been accused of sexual discrimination and ageism too as well. A subsequent internal investigation by Sony is said to have resulted in the claims being dismissed as a misunderstanding. So right now, this is I think a bigger news story than I think a lot of people are kind of taking note of. This is basically executives saying and being called out of really, really, really gross mixed conduct when it comes to this stuff. Now, as I mentioned before, I always want to take everything with a grain of salt when it comes to layoffs, but something as of this and these accusations also have to be taken seriously, because this is potentially horrible. This could be a workplace scandal in regards to Sony, and this could turn to a way, way bigger deal. We saw a lot of big stuff happen as well with Activision, and that was a huge drama too for basically people saying it was a man's industry and sexually harassing folks as well. And now I'm not the one that's kind of breaking the story itself, but I think this is a big one to note either way. Now, obviously, I've heard good things on other Sony and PlayStation studios. I've heard really good things on Insomniac, Naughty Dog, and a lot of the American-based sides. But this is also a weird acquisition kind of blended on in. Not to make excuses for anything, but to go and say this is big. This is actually should be a bigger news story than it's been so far. So job cuts at Firesprite were announced earlier this week as part of the mass layoffs across Sony Interactive Entertainment. Around 900 Sony Interactive employees, equating to around 8%, will lose their jobs, though it's unclear how many at Firesprite are impacted. Bloomberg reported that the studio's live service Twisted Metal project was canceled as a result of job losses, and then Eurogamer understands that the studio is also separately working on another high-profile game in a Sony franchise. So right now we were having people losing their jobs. But this is where it takes the next level, where a lot of folks are now calling out Sony executives and higher-ups for kind of basically being horrible people. And that also is just a horrible morale. So let's say you have a really bad workplace environment or a really bad boss, and now you're also facing looming layoffs where the gaming sphere in your stock is going down. This is rough. So these layoff sources say an alarming number of employees had left the studio in recent months following a retention bonus payout in October, designed to reward staff for remaining on the developer after the Sony acquisition for a further period of time. So for at least from my understanding, it seemed like they got the payoff, they stayed for the extra 2 years, and like we're like, all right, we're out. Like we got our bonus, we did our hours, we had to do it for our contracts, or let's go somewhere else. Public employee reviews, the Fire Spotting Company review, a website, Glassdoor describe horrendous studio heads who are way out of their depth and just care about money, leading to a toxic bullying culture and culture of fear. One recent review takes a more sympathetic view, though, stating Firesprite's old way was disorganized and Sony has remolded the studio, which has fluffled many feathers. So basically, like people that are actually working there, which I always want to say this, and this is not me trying to like downplay the issue here. I always make it like sense of like, hey, it's like a brand new boss, acquisitions, management, like, you know, maybe have to be a little bit more focused on work if you get acquired. I understand that we don't know the full picture, but that doesn't take away the fact that people are being sexually harassed or being toxic or being bullied or basically just being treated horribly. I just always want to say there's always two sides to a story, but if there's a very large amount of people speaking out about this, though, that adds a lot more merit to their claims and comments, especially now with how serious these acquisitions are coming out to as well. Eurogamer has spoken to a number of sources close to the company to understand the causes of this discontent, all of whom who wish to remain or not anonymous for the sake of their careers. Others told us that they don't wish to take to partake in the investigation for fear of reprisal. And if you're not actually able to even go talk about your company in terms of this is rough. Like the fact that multiple people are willing to want to leak this on PlayStation, this is rough. Sony said held a close relationship with Firesprite, which was born from the ashes of PlayStation's sadly shuttered studio Liverpool. The studio developed PlayStation's 4 exclusive The Playroom and its later expansion. It was also behind Little Big Planet spinoff Run Sackboy Run, and after work on several other PlayStation VR projects, Firesprite's buyout by Sony did not spark surprise. The take, however, was to most staff until its public announcement was met with cautious positivity, one source told Eurogamer. Many employees or PlayStation fans were excited by the news, basically saying like, hey, you have a random third-party title, you get bought out by PlayStation, you're excited, hoping for better job security, support, and other perks, while being mindful of the risk of a new corporate processes not all would agree with. I think the majority of folks saw it as either an opportunity or I'll stick it out, basically saying like, hey, PlayStation's notable, this might be good for us, we might get more job opportunities, we might have a chance to go work on bigger IPs, may have more funding, and right now that's why a lot of folks stayed kind of either for their bonuses or just because they're hoping for the future or improving their careers, which we're not against, like we support devs doing better. However, multiple events led to major changes in leadership in Firesprite. This included the sad passing of a replaceable HR leader, leaving the studio's small HR team reportedly unable to deal with managing the studio's staff while also incorporating Sony's HR policies. So basically, like, you lose the head honcho who's good at their job, and then you have all these people that are like, you know, the secondhand folks. And then part two of this is also the fact of like, this is a big acquisition. This is a Sony acquisition. This is a million upon $1 million deal. You need to have everyone kind of running on all cylinders to make sure the acquisition goes well. So it seems like with a really bad toxic work culture, with really bad management, it seems like everyone is just not doing good in the studio. All but one of the original Firesprite founders have now left the company over the past year. The last of what made Firesprite a good place to work at went with them, one source told the Eurogamer. Sources we spoke to remain unclear as to why the founders left, and there's talk of a domino effect, basically being like, hey, this isn't like a good job, or we got our acquisition bonus, we got our Sony stock, whatever we did, now is our time to leave. And as well, there also said some speculation that founders were forced out by Sony rather than taking a voluntary exit. Also, all this is alleged, sources have said. The sudden departure of a former studio head, Graham Inkers, in May, for instance, was described by one source as simply unbelievable. And this is all just ongoing right now, where people are curious on the future of the game company itself. New leadership was subsequently bought in from Sony supporting Studio XDev, something one source described as classic nepotism, and basically saying that Sony tried to go and kind of take over the company, and ever since then, everything's been going downhill. Said seems leadership doesn't need to be earned, and trust is gone. Another source described them as an inadequate, toxic mess, tyrants and bullies who treat people like it's a factory. This is horrible. Like, this quote is literally saying this is basically us feeling like we're working in a factory and they're being mistreated, and it's horrible. Now, once again, obviously take everything with a grain of salt, but this salt is kind of piling up really big on the PlayStation side. Now, there could be a lot more to this. They're basically saying, like, right now the leadership is Like, it needs to be there. They're understanding this investigation was rough, that these leaders are doing really bad. There was regards to sexual discrimination and ageism too as well, which I may just want to say, if you guys want me to do a little bit more of a deep dive in this one and see if there's anything else coming out with it, I can. But right now, this is rough. This is PlayStation people coming out, and I don't want to make this video go too long, but just this off alone is the fact that this is seemingly having horrible toxic culture, and employees are wanting to leave, and higher up got full on replaced, and the studio is no more, on top of the mix of all these layoffs, and on top as well with all the Bungie drama too, which we don't know the full picture on all of this, but this is looking really bad right now for PlayStation. So we might go cover this news a bit more maybe tomorrow if more information comes out, but I want to go talk about this a decent bit more. But make sure you guys are subscribed, give me your thoughts. This is not good news and wind down the night. I'm gonna go and chill and take a bath or something. Make sure you guys are subscribed and notifications on Twitter, Twitch, and down below. Appreciate y'all for watching.